Alright, should be recording. Just better check. It looks okay. Alright, comment video. I ruined my back today. I have to walk all hunched over. It's very bad. I have so much I gotta move. Life is just such a pain in the ass. Anyway, I'm a pain in the back. Are you familiar with another charlatan, Robert O.T.? No, I wasn't familiar, so I looked it up real quick, and yeah, some cowboy guy or something, I don't know. Electric universe type. I know from actual experience since I talked with him for a whole year in 2014. He's trying to molest you, I guess. The guy seems to sell bullshit. Walter Russell Brooks and peddles bullshit. Sacred geometry. Yeah, well, that's Ken Wheeler kind of stuff for sure. From another con artist named Frank Chester. That guy's sort of interesting because these are all characters. They're all interesting. They all have some engineering background, which is nice, and so they got some kind of blah blah blah. But yeah, they're nuts. He's got some seven theory. The whole universe is based on sevens. And that's the kind of stuff you do. That's the kind of stuff I did, in youth. It's the mistake you make in youth. Yeah, 3 dimensions, 3 kinds of orbital bodies. 3 was my number. 3. And then I let go of it, luckily. Check out Wim Hof method. Cured my depression. Well, I might get around to that, but I doubt it'll cure mine. Because mine's real. The rest of you people get depressed for no good reason. I get depressed for very good reasons. 2510. Not trying to cherry pick, but from what I've heard, the energy that is lost via destructive interference goes back to the source. Yeah, that's only true. And it's not really true because it's not destructive interference that sends it back. Obviously. Again, the argument would be if it sent it back, that would be the same as missing, so it couldn't be destructive. Sending it back would be a reflection, which would be, you couldn't tell the difference between a reflection and just passing each other, so it can't really mean anything. And this circumstance is more like waves. Their dynamics, they're tending to go in the same direction. They just have a pressure going one way's going up and this one's going down, but they're going forward. So the reflection, if there was to be one, would have to be backwards. And that really doesn't work. I mean, there's no reason to think they would reflect backwards, that they would go forward instead. I don't know. It's so hard to. You have to eliminate the different motions that are in their motion. So they're coming at each other, one going up, one going down. So get rid of the forward part of that component and just turn it into the up and down component. And then you could say, yeah, well, they're going to pass right through each other. So the up part's going to go this way and the down part's going to go this way. But there wouldn't be any real way to get back to the source till it actually hits something. So waves don't send energy back to the source till they actually hit something. This is the case with sound waves, so I don't think it is the case with sound waves. The sound has to bounce off of something to reflect. That's not really destructive interference. So I assume, and if you sent 2 sounds into each other, again, it wouldn't be destructive interference, it would be just the same as the constructive interference. They'd have the same dilemma. The constructive interference has to pass through each other too. Because the sound doesn't just evaporate or doesn't make the atmosphere hot or doesn't do anything else. So it obviously, the 2 waves, even if they're constructively in phase, they'll pass through each other and look like a standing wave. But you can't really say they're doing anything different. Constructive wouldn't be any different than destructive in sound. So I assume physicists would say the same for light. but they're very different things, so I can't see how you could say they're the same at all. Obviously, light doesn't contain some low pressure and high pressure. The phase isn't, you know, it's photon or no photon. It's a little different than something going down, moving stuff down, and stuff moving up. You should be able to detect that lost energy in some way if it is indeed sent back to the production point. So again, destructive interference in photons certainly won't get you a reflection back to the source. So that's pretty much out of the question. And again, the momentum is always in one direction. So I'm just saying it's more likely that there'll be a new vector for the energy, but the energy will still be going in the forward direction because the two things aren't meeting, going in opposite directions. Most destructive interference, most of the things that are claimed to be destructive interference, right? I'm claiming they're not, but I'm just saying in waves, destructive interference isn't destructive in opposite directions. It's destructive in a forward direction, but with opposite momentums in that direction. So you're not going to get a reflection. Alright, so mindless marbles. This actually depends on the arrangement of the waves. In certain setups, the energy will be relocated, concentrated to the peaks. Well, I'd say that's where it has to go. So if we're going to say that the water goes flat, so it's neither high up or down, then we have to say that energy went somewhere and either move the water forward faster, but forward would be tricky, right? Because these waves are going into each other this way. So forward would be actually going into a constructive interfering wave. So forward for the destructive interference path. See, the paths are not vertical. So you'd say when forward for the path from the destructive line, forward would end up going into the constructive interference. So it would make the what would it make it? Can't make it higher and lower at the same time, so that still doesn't work. You have two kinds of energy going up and you have energy going down. Those two energies have to go somewhere. They can't neutralize, so they have to go somewhere. Something has to go lower and something has to go higher. Alright, anyway, in other cases where the entire path is cancelled, or whatever you want to call it, well, I mean, that's the whole problem, right? Is you can't cancel energy. There's only positive energy, and it's positive in a direction. And it doesn't matter that the directions are opposite, the energy has to still go somewhere. Like in the case of beam splitter, so here we are, the energy is indeed redirected back to the source. No, it's reflected, it's not redirected. It only goes back to the source when it reflects off something. So the beam splitters are quite obvious. It's not being redirected back to the source, it's being reflected back to the source. The amplitude can be plus or minus, but the intensity, I mean, yes, it's more than one reflection, don't get me wrong, but they're all, the light is obviously reflected. There's no special redirection. It's just that it happens to be that some of the mirrors in the end point back to the source. The amplitude can be plus or minus, but the intensity, the energy per second times area, is always plus. The amplitude can be plus or minus. Again, that kind of conversation doesn't belong in a light conversation, in my opinion, because light doesn't have an amplitude. So, and we know this is about single photons in the classical sense of quantum mechanics. So clearly amplitude is quite irrelevant. It's either on or off. But the intensity, energy per area, is always plus. Yeah, well, there's no minus mosquitoes, as Hoffaday would say. Yes, it's indeed said that people like Theora have such a base with so many upvotes. Well, we saw the character of his audience. I mean, it's unfortunate that apparently these companies like Sony and Nikon and Fuji, they probably should be tried for stealing money from retards, because apparently photographers are retarded. I mean, really retarded. This is the problem with the media. People go on camera, spout many words, and in short amount of time, and put everyone else into a trance. Quite depressing really. Yeah, well, I just don't... I think there's more to the story. Why are people so... they're willing participants in their gullibility. And how can they be so logically vacant? I mean, how, you just can't imagine how somebody can say, like I said, these defenders of this obtuse and insensible jargon of Ken's. These are really dumb people. These aren't people who have watched physics videos or know anything about mechanics. These are people who, burn themselves lighting a stove or something. I mean, these are people who can't take the gas cap off their car. And they're talking as if they understand something. And that's the part that's just too bizarre. I mean, they're obviously lying, but why are they lying? Alright, so another F in internet. English is not my first language. I know, so it's not my problem. Honestly, I'm not a Ken fanboy. Well, you're going to sound like it here, I think. I don't care about his personality. I don't care about his personality either. I care about the fact that he uses insensible nonsense jargon and pretends he's talking intelligently. I only care about if there are errors in his logic and our facts. There is no logic. You can't possibly follow it. There are no facts either. He keeps bringing up shit that doesn't exist. Counter space, some sort of new definition of inertia. He uses words that, even when he uses a word you can recognize, like inertia, he doesn't mean inertia. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all, but there's no facts in anything he says. Do you think there's tornadoes coming out of magnets? Do you think that magnets can bend light? I mean, he says things that are just factually incorrect. For the most part, you are just complaining about the choice of word he's using. No, I'm complaining about the fact that he's vacuous on concepts. These are not rationally cognizable concepts. There's no concept. I don't care what word you use. I don't care what you call your ether even. But when you say your ether is counter space, what the fuck does that mean? How do you make any sense out of this nonsense? If it's an ether, you should be able to explain how it works. And where's his explanation? There's no explanation. It has a certain kind of magnitude that disappears. Fuck you. It's just bullshit. To explain something instead of understanding what he's trying to say. What do you mean understanding what he's trying to say? Why don't you interpret it then if you think you understand what he's trying to say? What the fuck is he trying to say? Why don't you explain it to me? Yeah, if you watch some random videos of Ken, I've watched most all of his magnetism videos. Probably. You don't have that, you don't understand I've done that? And I'm not a dumb person. I'm saying none of it makes any sense. I can't make any sense out of a fucking thing he said. I've pointed out a couple of times, like once in a while he'll talk about mitigating pressure, and I'll say, well, there, you're getting onto something I understand. I understand pressure. But how do you make sense out of light is like a coaxial cable? How do you make sense out of that? In what possible way could it be like a coaxial cable? You mean it has a path going forward and a path going backward? It's connected at both ends? It's a rope? What the fuck is he talking about? Videos, Ken will make no sense to the average person. He'll make no sense to an intelligent person. Quite obviously, he's making sense to average assholes. I don't think he could possibly. I could take the smartest IQ people, Mensa people, and they could watch his videos, and they're not going to be able to understand what the fuck he's talking about. Don't pretend you have to be intelligent to understand him. You have to be an idiot to understand him. He's talking baby talk. It's all gibberish. It's one gibberish concept after another. There is no law that requires him to make things easy to understand. The law is you can't call it rational if it doesn't have any continuity with known vocabulary and the use of words that have known properties. You can't say there's such a thing as dielectricity until you fucking demonstrate this fucking whatever it is, this dielectricity. How is it different than regular electricity? What are you fucking talking about? There's only one electricity, asshole. I don't know if you've been clued in on this, but there's no evidence that any other kind of electricity exists, called the dielectricity. Understand the average person. You will need to read his book. I told you, well, read with two E's. His book, not that I haven't made that mistake more than once. From start to finish. I read his fucking moronic book. I have to say that most of the time my brain did, I kept catching myself saying, whoops, you forgot to turn your brain on. It went into sleep mode. Because it is just, you can't, there's not a recognizable term, there's not a recognizable concept. Absolutely none of it makes any goddamn sense. It's like you might as well be speaking Jap-a-fucking-niece. From start to finish, to understand what he means with things like inertia and acceleration, etc. Why don't you explain it again? What the fuck does he mean? What the fuck does he mean? You don't need to be the smartest guy to understand what he's talking about. Again, you have to be the dumbest. When you have invested enough time to understand, then make a video response explaining errors in his logic or facts. Again, there's no fucking logic. He doesn't depend on an experiment to explain anything. He has no facts in his fucking theory. His theory is not connected to the known universe as discerned through experimentation. He connects nothing to an actual fact. Nothing. I've demonstrated that when he does experiments, how he cheats in every one of them. Otherwise, did he ever do the update when he did the rolling the little balls across the magnet? And he said, "What do you think's causing this?" And he was going to explain it, but he never explained it. Right? Why? Because he's full of shit. Otherwise, it's impossible to take you seriously. Well, fuck you. You're going to just get blocked. You want to play this fucking asshole game. I've watched more of his videos than you have, probably, jackass. I've been watching his stupid, turdy, nonsense videos for 2 fucking years. It's all documented. I gave him a polite response saying, let's have a debate, Ken. And what did he do? He mocked my appearance and laughed. He's a fucking coward. He talks nonsense. Alright? And you're playing some fucking defending this stupid piece of shit. You idiot. Of magnetism. And the choice of words he uses is that you need to understand some concepts. What fucking set? I'm trying to... He says this is happening. And he says this is happening. Well, where's the fucking evidence that any of that's happening? Where? Do you have a single fucking shred of evidence? No, no evidence at all. I mean, you're just such a shithead. Before you can understand other concepts, it's not that hard to understand. Yeah, well, just fuck you. Let's go look at his book, by the way. Here's a random page. You know, this whole gyroscope crap. See, another gimmick of his, right? Puts the gyroscope on the edge of the magnet, right? Which is exposing it to the south pole of the magnet. So he says, look, when the gyroscope is here on top of the magnet, it spins and spins and spins. Yeah, that's right. There's only one that's essentially sitting in a monopole. When you have a magnet this big and you stick the gyroscope in the middle, it's essentially a monopole from the gyroscope's point of view. So there can't possibly be eddy currents and all that crap because you don't have 2 poles of the magnet exposed to it. Not that there can't be eddy currents. But obviously there can't be the conflicting ones. And so when he puts it on the edge of the magnet, he's hanging it over, so now it's hitting the south pole, so obviously now it's a dipole. Dipoles are going to have, what's it called, damping. They're going to dampen. I mean, it's such an obvious fact. Alright, so let's just read one paragraph out of this nonsense. And they'll give you a little visual tour, but I mean the book is completely incoherent. It's the same mush that he talks. Attraction by magnetic mass to a non-magnetized piece of iron is created by an ether vacuum vortex. ether vacuum vortex. Now, what could an ether vacuum vortex mean? You mean where there is no ether? Or what could that possibly mean? Can you make sense out of that ether vacuum vortex? Is that space? So it's a space vortex because the ether is not involved? Can't be counter space because then it wouldn't be a vacuum. Can't have a vacuum in counter space, can you? Which naturally tends itself towards equalization between the iron and the magnet. So there's a piece of iron and a magnet, and somehow an ether vortex is being created between them. And that means it's tending towards equalization by creating a tornado. That's how you equalize things, is to have a tornado first. Well, at least that'll flatten everything. In presence of the ether magnetic, so we have the ether magnetic now, whatever that is, right? They hyphenated this. I didn't hyphenate it, he did. In the presence of the ether magnetic field, there is a dielectric contraction. So again, what is a dielectric contraction? What could that possibly be? How does anybody, how can a rational person, I mean, they know what a dielectric is, which is essentially an insulator used in capacitors, but what the fuck, there is no other dielectric. In the unmagnetized mass, so there's a dielectric contraction in the iron, okay, because that's not magnetized until, well, it sort of is. As soon as it starts moving, it's already been magnetized. Since dielectricity is counterspatial, it's only counterspatial. It's not counter space, though, but it's counterspatial, which means that it's etherish. Means because counterspace is supposed to be ether. So essentially it's saying since dielectricity is counterspatial, that means dielectricity is ethery. Means there is an interatomic dilation. An interatomic dilation. What do you make sense? How do you make sense out of that? Pertaining to magneto-attractive vacuum dilation. So there's a interatomic dilation that's pertaining to the magneto-attractive vacuum dilation. I mean, there's I mean, it's 3 sentences and there's enough. You're already exhausted. How the fuck could you figure out what any of this is? In shrinking the dielectricity in the atom. Okay, so now at least we have the dielectricity was in the atom, and so with the ether in the atom, as it rebounds in opposition to the magnetic field. So now we're still in the iron, and the iron has the dielectricity in it, and now it's going to rebound in opposition. It dilates the magnetoatomic volume, causing magnetoetheric attraction. Magnetoetheric attraction. So that's how magnets work. They cause attraction by causing some sort of dilating dielectricity vacuum dilation via induction towards self-voidance towards self-avoidance of polarization via induction and towards self-voidance of polarization. Now, I'm sorry, to the magnet, which is only a simplex pressure gradient equalization. So the magnet is not doing anything. It's like a simple gradient of something, equalization, but the iron thing is having all kinds of issues. Magnetism always seeks geometric spatial equilibrium. So what does that even mean? Why does it do that? As do all fields. So the magnet is a field, or what does that even mean? How do fields do that? How do fields look for something? The magneto-negative pressure, okay, at least now we got a charge of some kind. Pressures created in the atomic dilation of the non-magnetized mass. Now, the non-magnetized mass isn't supposed to have negative pressure. Is being filled by the field gradient of the magnet. So anyway, so this is a self-seeking dielectric equilibrium. However, in its root, just as two magnets of inverse spin, so again, magnets have spin, there's no evidence of any of that, being brought together will form a perfect spherical, sorry, it's far away, field before mating. Mating. Oh, there's something interesting. Let's see. So here we go. The two magnets of inverse spin being brought together will form a perfect spherical field before mating, which is a centripetal dielectric gravitative like aberrational inertia equalization. Attributional inertia equalization. The iron or other ferrous mass in a pressure equalization seeking between the magnet and the stable iron. Well, anyway, so this is, you can't tell me that Joe Puckhead can get any of that. And again, it doesn't make any sense to anybody rational because it's gibberish. So yeah, I should just block you because you're just so full of shit. You don't understand what he just said there, you fucker. You do not. No fucking way. So let's just jump ahead and see what other cartoons are in this book. Let's zoom out so we can see the charming and lovely. But most of the book, like I said, is just littered with a bunch of quotes from Tesla and this guy and that guy. Preposterous claims. Again, he thinks he's bending light with magnets. These are better drawings than he had in the old version. But it just rambles from page to page to page. It doesn't make any sense. It's just all written in that same jargon. There's not a single paragraph here, unless they're one of the quotes, that you can make any sense out of it at all. Just a bunch of gibberish. This is what he says a magnet's doing. There's no evidence of any of this shit happening in a magnet. But I've already explained that. So, you're just hopeless. People are just so fucking stupid. Alright. Let's see, just one simple question. I doubt it. Can you answer why gluons, why are you asking me a gluon question? I don't think gluons are real. Work completely opposite to magnetic fields. That is, the further you try to separate the gluons, well, I don't think that's true. I think it's the gluons are stuck to quarks, and it becomes the further you try to separate the quarks, the stronger the gluons fight back. The gluons, the forces holding them together increases exponentially until you apply enough energy to break the bond. Yeah, they're just a contrivance. Clearly, the mechanisms inside of atomic structure, the attractive thing between protons and electrons and the repulsive thing between them, kind of has a kind of exponential nature, in the sense that as you get two electrons closer and closer together, it takes more and more energy to move them any closer. So it's kind of like the opposite of gravity, but it's, the ability to move gets a lot easier the further away you get from a gravitational body, the less energy you need to move. And this, and so these are, but these are just mathematical abstractions. Gluons don't have any, there's no experimental gluon knowledge. They're just abstract notions in people's heads. There's no real evidence of their existence. I know Benjamin Franklin derived a lot of the terms used in modern electrical engineering. I don't know if there were all that many. Plus and minus were his. That was sort of a mistake. Obviously he labeled them wrong. From practical experiments, Franklin is not accorded his due credit for his great electrical discoveries. Well, I don't know. He's a pretty famous fellow, but yeah, I would argue that they frankly should have named something out after him, the Franklin. There should be some electrical term called a Franklin. Name number of Franklins. Yes, he labeled them incorrectly. This is only arbitrary, as all electrical theory still works. It's not arbitrary, frankly. Plus, more, less, minus is less. That's pretty important when you have that backwards. So to say it hasn't fucked up the continuity of all electrical theory, it certainly has. It has people doing all kinds of dopey stuff, like saying the voltage goes this way and the current goes that way. Lots of wacky shit going on because of that mistake. So it's a pretty significant mistake. I'm not saying he should be crucified for it. I'm saying science should be crucified for not fixing it a long time ago. They should have just said, enough of this crap, let's fix it. So anyway. So, yeah, she seemed pretty annoying Australian turd guy. I mean, this whole glue-on crap, and I don't know what the fuck you're even saying. I know Benjamin Franklin derived a lot of... I don't know what you're, I don't think I've ever dissed Benjamin Franklin in any serious way. So, I don't get you. Alright, that's probably enough. Keep it short, as I'm infirmed. Alright, let's see if there's anything else in the subscriptions, and we'll just get the hell out of here. Let's see, Alexander Unzicker interview. Einstein lost key. Oh, well, that'll be nice and boring. Unfortunately. Yeah. So, yeah, I won't play in 43 minutes, no point in doing that. So anyway, we'll just call it a day and move along and such. Yeah, I'm really okay when I'm sitting down. As soon as I try to stand up, oh, it's bad.